My wife, Lauren Baker, texted me, "One last order and I'm coming home." That was the last thing she ever said. Yesterday, the sheriff called. They found her restaurant's industrial stove in the forest, miles from town, still bolted to the tile floor it once stood on. I've had the same ringtone for 14 years. A gentle chime, nothing special, but it's the sound I heard the last time Lauren called me on a busy Friday in 2011. When it rang yesterday and Sheriff Noah Price said, "Adam, I need you to drive out to County Road 16, I felt a familiar cold climb up the back of my neck. For a second, I was 35 again, waiting by our front window with the porch light on, telling myself she'd walk up the path any minute. Back then, I used to sit at one of the corner tables in her restaurant, Baker and Pine, and watch her through the pass. People thought Lauren was showing off, plating every dish herself like a TV chef, but really she was calming herself. She'd line up the baby carrots, tilt the sauce just so. When she was in control of the plate, the noise of everything else, the investors, the gossip, her own heartbeat, settled. That's why I never understood the private dinners. She insisted on hosting a few each month after closing. Just a handful of high rollers, by invitation, no staff, no chatter. "It's creative therapy," she told me. "One last order and I'm done." And then she'd text that little heart. County Road 16 used to be the way we'd go apple picking. Now it cuts to an old timber lot the city is clearing for a hiking trail. A storm last month washed out a section of the hill, exposing dirt that hadn't seen light in decades. That's where Noah met me, beyond the sawhorses. A ribbon of mud, a stand of maples, and a rectangle of stained ceramic tiles in the middle of the woods, as if someone had sliced a piece of kitchen floor and dragged it out there. On top of that rectangle sat the stove. Even rusted, it made my chest tighten. The 4-burner Vermont Crown Range had been Lauren's splurge, her one indulgence when we built the restaurant. "If I'm going to spend my life over heat," she'd said, "I want the one that listens." She meant the way the flame responded under a pan, like it wanted to help. Now the dials were fused in place. Vines threaded through the grates. But the stove was still bolted to the tile, the way code required back then. Thick bolts sunk through into a metal plate that must have been poured with the floor. Someone had moved all of it, the range, the plate, a chunk of tile and subfloor out here, and left it like a tomb. Noah kept his voice soft. Construction crew was grading the hill for the trail. Their dozer hit this. When they started scraping the dirt, they realized it wasn't junk. We secured the area and called forensics. He led me closer. A tech lifted the foil of a flashlight. "See that shimmer under the burners?" she said. "We believe it's old blood, oxidized, and there's melted glass fused to the oven floor, like a bottle exploded in there under serious heat." She glanced at me. "Mr. Baker, I'm sorry." I pressed my hand flat on the cold tile rim. I could see a faint grease stain where her right hip used to brush the range when she leaned to grab a pan. And there, on the back of the control panel, was a rectangle shadow, a place where a magnetic timer used to sit. Lauren's timer had a chipped corner and a tiny heart sticker on it, a gag gift from our niece. I whispered, "She always set it 3 minutes longer than she needed so she could talk to guests without burning the duck." Noah waited. He'd known me since high school baseball. "Adam," he finally said, "there's something else." The service sticker on the back survived. It has the serial number and the repair company. I think it'll help us place dates, maybe who moved this thing. We walked around the range. Under a flap of vine was a faded sticker, Wilcox Commercial Appliances, a number with a 616 Boston area code, and the serial, VC4B1107LB. The LB punched me in the lungs, Lauren had asked the installer to etch her initials into the plate for good luck. Silly, but there it was. Undeniable. A tech called out, "Sheriff, you need to see this." She was prying at a clogged lip beneath the control panel, where grease and paper sometimes collect. With tweezers, she extracted 3 folded slips, browned and brittle, protected from rain by the range's overhang. They were invoice tear-offs, the kind you rip from a duplicate pad. 2 had North Coast Provisioners across the top, our old food supplier. The third was from a company I'd never seen, Harbor and Hearth Catering, LLC. I stared. We never hired a caterer. We were a restaurant. The tech pointed to a line item. This one says H&H, private function, cash on delivery. The date, August 5th, 2011. The night Lauren disappeared was August 5th. The forest went quiet. Somewhere a crow lifted off a branch. I could hear Lauren's last text in my head, the way she dotted the heart. That night in 2011, she'd said she was staying late for one last order. I'd fallen asleep on the couch with the TV on and woke to my phone glowing. "Love you," she'd typed. "Locking up now." She never walked through the door. I looked at Noah. "What is Harbor and Hearth?" "We don't know yet," he said. "But I think it's your next step." I didn't know it then, but the stove had given me more than grief. It had given me something I hadn't had in years, a starting point. I didn't go home right away. I drove to the old strip mall where Baker and Pine had been. A hardware store occupies the space now. Through the big front windows, I could see rows of paint cans standing where the bar used to be. The owner, a woman named Ava Monroe, recognized me. Most folks in our town do, because the case made the news, then sunk into that place where everyone remembers, but no one knows what to say. "I know you," she said gently. "You're Lauren's husband. I'm so sorry. We bought this place in 2014, had to gut it. If you need to look around, you can." The air inside was cooler, but the bones of the building hadn't changed. I walked to the back wall where the kitchen had been. Ava showed me a patch where the drywall looked newer. "We had a sink leak here a couple years ago," she said. "Had to open the wall and replace. We found old screws and broken tiles stuffed in there like someone had hidden them." "Tiles?" I asked. She pulled a box from under the counter, the kind you keep mismatched parts in. On top was a square of cream tile with a faint blue edge, the same tile that sat under the stove in the woods. I turned it over. On the back, someone had written with a carpenter pencil, 4LR48. I felt a shiver run through me. Lauren used codes when she wanted to remember a recipe tweak. 4L could mean 4 lemons, R48, a rack position or roast temperature. But on a tile? Ava pointed to a second tile. This one had a notch cut out. We thought a contractor had messed up a pipe. You can take them if you like. I didn't tell her the truth. Sometimes, back when things got tense with the restaurant, Lauren calmed herself by rearranging. She'd move a shelf, shift pan hooks, retile a section of wall. It made her feel like she was getting ahead of chaos. If she needed to hide something, doing it behind tile would have been second nature. At home, I spread the tiles on our dining table, next to a box of old papers Noah had returned to me over the years. Payroll forms, liquor receipts, and, buried under a stack of menus, a business card I had forgotten. Wilcox Commercial Appliances. I dialed the faded number. A woman named Maya Wilcox answered. Her father had owned the shop before it closed. "I'm calling about a range you serviced in 2011, I said. "Vermont Crown, serial ending in LB. She didn't have to look it up. "We installed one like that in July 2011 for a chef named Baker," she said. "We did a follow-up service call on August 3rd. My dad wrote notes in the margin. Customer asked about bolting range to plate personally. Odd request. He also wrote, customer tipped well, nervous. That sounds like Lauren, I said. Do your notes say anything about moving equipment? No, Maya said. But I remember a guy who called 2 days later asking about renting the kind of dolly it takes to move a bolted range. We didn't rent those. He left a name, though. Evan Blake. I wrote it down. My hands shook a little. I looked at the invoice slips again, the 2 from North Coast and the 1 from Harbor and Hearth. I knew North Coast. Every restaurant in our county used them. But Harbor and Hearth, if it was a catering company, where was it based? I typed the name into the Secretary of State's website. A listing popped up. Harbor and Hearth Catering, LLC, registered August 1st, 2011. Registered agent, Isabella Kerr. Mailing address, P.O. Box 147, Rockport, M.A. No physical address. It had been dissolved for failure to file taxes in 2012. Isabella Kerr. That name I knew. She'd been Lauren's first sous chef, the one with the steady hands who could turn out perfect risotto by feel. She'd left Baker and Pine in early 2011 after a fight in the walk-in Lauren never explained. I found Isabella's number through a friend and called. She picked up on the 3rd ring. Her voice was wary. Adam? You registered Harbor and Hearth, I said. Why? Silence slid between us. Finally, she sighed. I knew this would come back. I started H&H for Lauren because she wanted to keep the private dinners quiet. She thought doing them under a separate name would stop investors from meddling. Isabella's voice tightened. We argued because I said it smelled wrong. The cash-only part, the late nights. She said it was clean money for creative freedom. Adam, I swear to you, I didn't know what she'd stumbled into. What do you mean, stumbled into? She was buying produce through North Coast, like everyone, she said. But someone new started showing up to deliveries that summer. A rep named Caleb Russo. He pushed her into bundling specialty items, truffles, imported saffron, caviar, that came through a side channel. The prices were low, the paperwork vague. Vague how? Isabella rustled papers like she was pulling something from a folder. No item weights, no lot numbers, just chef's choice crate for a lump sum. Lauren told him it wasn't compliant. He told her to relax, that the crates were from friends of the house. She joked that it sounded like a mob thing. He didn't laugh. I pictured Lauren's face when she felt cornered, a small stillness at the mouth, like she was waiting to see if she had to run or bite. Did she tell you why she moved the private dinners under Harbor and Hearth? Because she wanted to use what came in those crates without it touching Baker and Pine's books, Isabella said. She thought separating it would protect the restaurant. A beat. And us. I drove to Rockport the next morning. The P.O. box was closed. The clerk, a woman with bright blue glasses named Cynthia Ward, remembered forwarding mail from Harbor and Hearth for about a year to a storage unit just outside town. She scribbled an address on a sticky note. At the storage complex, the manager told me the Harbor and Hearth unit had been abandoned and auctioned back in 2013. But the buyer, he said, flipping his ledger, was a Mr. Oscar Bennett, local handyman, lives in a trailer park near the quarry. The quarry. I pulled over on the drive out to breathe. The old granite quarry is where teenagers swim in the summer, where the water turns black at dusk. Lauren and I used to walk there on Sundays when we first met, tossing pebbles to see the ripples widen. The thought of anything connected to her ending up there made my heart thump weird and heavy. Oscar Bennett's trailer sat near the far edge of the park, under a crooked pine. He was in his late 60s, wiry, with a face that said he'd had a lifetime of bad coffee and hard work. When I said Lauren's name, he flinched slightly. "Buddy, I'm sorry about your wife," he said. "I bought a storage unit on Harbor and Hearth, sure. Bunch of junk mostly. Linens, A busted mixer. I scrubbed the tablecloths and resold them. Why? Was there anything else? Paperwork, drives, notes? Oscar scratched his cheek, thinking. There was a recipe box, he said, but it didn't have recipes. Looked like codes. I couldn't make heads or tails. I tossed it into a crate I keep for scrap. Old wires, weird tools. The crate's in the shed. You can look. Inside the shed, dust and the smell of old oil hung in the air. We found the crate under a wheelbarrow. At the bottom, wedged between two coils of coax cable, was a small wooden box with a hinged lid. It had once held recipe cards. Taped under the divider was a Ziploc bag. Inside the bag was a small USB drive and a folded index card. The card said, "If you're reading this, it means I failed to make it home. 4L R48. L. I didn't have to ask what 4L R48 meant anymore. 4 tiles left, row 48, or something like that. The wall behind the range at Baker and Pine had been tiled in a numbered grid when we installed it. Lauren counted rows the way some people count seconds, without thinking. I thanked Oscar and drove straight back to the hardware store. Ava listened to my explanation with wide eyes and said, "Let's do it." She closed early. We pulled the stainless work table away from the back wall and studied the tile pattern. In the corner, near the floor, was a tile with a notch like the one in my box at home. 48 rows up from the baseboard, Ava said. We counted slowly, careful not to lose track. The tile at row 48, tile number 4 from the left, had a hairline crack. I slipped a thin putty knife under the edge. It popped loose with a reluctant sigh of old grout. Behind the tile was a shallow cavity. Inside the cavity was a heat-sealed vacuum bag, the kind you use for sous vide. Inside the bag was a cell phone in a plastic case and a thin stack of folded papers. The phone was an old model, long dead. The papers were crisp. At the top, invoice. North Coast Provisioners, August 5th, 2011. Line items looked normal. Greens, lamb, fruit, until I noticed a faint dot next to each that didn't appear on other invoices. At the bottom was a signature I didn't recognize. I unfolded a second paper. It was a printout of an email. From Lauren Baker. To Inspector Samuel Grant, Massachusetts Department of Agriculture. Subject: concerning falsified lot numbers and side channel deliveries. The email detailed a pattern: crates delivered without documentation, pressure to accept off-books items, and a rep named Caleb Russo, also known as CR. There were photographs attached, images of crates stamped with numbers that didn't match North Coast's system. On the third sheet, in Lauren's handwriting, were contact numbers: Noah P., after 10 p.m. Isabella, don't call during service. Evan Blake, driver, ask about dolly rental, and one line underlined twice: if something happens, tell Adam to look behind R48. I sat on the floor of the hardware store and cried openly for the first time in years. Ava squatted next to me. She was planning to do the right thing, she said quietly. She left you a map. The sheriff's office sent a tech to bag the phone and papers. Noah came himself, his jaw set. This is what we needed, he said. He took the USB drive too. Our lab can pull whatever's on it. In the days that followed, the story moved like molasses and lightning at the same time. The lab got into the phone. Inside were audio memos Lauren had recorded in the kitchen after hours, maybe to calm herself by talking through it. Lauren had always been a talker when she was scared. In them, she described how Caleb had leaned hard on her to accept crates she couldn't account for. She suspected the shipments were being used to launder cash, fake invoices for expensive goods that never actually arrived, the money passing clean through her books. She also suspected that some crates held stolen high-end food items diverted from other restaurants' orders. She had set a meeting with Inspector Samuel Grant for the morning of August 6th to hand over the documents. She never made it. The USB drive contained spreadsheets labeled H&H Private with initials that seemed like recipes, SF 2.5K, CR 3K. But when the lab overlaid those columns with the dates of the private dinners and the corresponding bank withdrawals, a pattern emerged. Numbers that fit perfectly with cash deposits made at a local credit union by a limited partnership linked to North Coast Provisioners and a shell company tied to a man named Marcus Valdez. Valdez's right-hand man? Caleb Russo. We interviewed Evan Blake, the guy who'd asked about the dolly rental. He worked for a moving company back then. A guy paid me cash to help relocate kitchen equipment for a remodel, he said. It was after midnight. He said the owner knew. We unbolted a range, lifted it with a pallet jack, and ratchet strapped it to a floor plate. Another truck took a fridge. They didn't tell me where they were going. 2 men came with a flatbed. One was tall, dark hair. The other had a scar on his upper lip. He closed his eyes, remembering. They were nervous, kept checking their phones. Noah showed him a photo lineup. Evan's finger hovered, then landed on a picture. "That's him," he said. "Caleb." I thought the worst was knowing, in my bones, that Lauren had died in that kitchen. But grief has layers you don't expect. The deeper one, the one that kept me awake, was imagining her realizing that truth as it unfolded, that she had walked into a trap. When the case broke in the local press, a tip came from a nurse at a rehab center. A patient named Oscar Bennett, the same Oscar who had bought the storage unit, had been admitted with a stroke a few months earlier. He told the nurse he sometimes saw the chef in dreams and had been too scared to speak up when it mattered. Noah and I sat with Oscar in a quiet room, the blinds tilted so the afternoon light made stripes on the floor. Oscar's eyes watered. "I was younger then," he said. "I needed money. A man I knew from the quarry, Ralph Moreno, asked if I could do a late-night haul for a private event. He said it was just moving things, no big deal. I showed up at Baker and Pine after midnight with my flatbed. The side door was open. The stove and a chunk of floor were ready to go, strapped to a plate like someone had planned it. "Was Lauren there?" I whispered. Oscar looked at me a long time. "Yes and no," he said. "I didn't see her face. There was a shape under a tarp, and a bottle shattered in the oven like they were trying to burn something. Then thought better of it. The men were panicked, the tall one with the scar. He lifted the tarp and said, 'We didn't mean it.' But that's the thing about pushing. It's hard to control how far something falls." "What does that mean?" Oscar swallowed. "They said she slipped. They said she hit her head on the metal ledge by the stove after she threw a glass bottle at them. They were supposed to scare her, that's all, to make her stop calling around. But she fought. She always fought." I closed my eyes against the wave that hit me. Lauren always fought. Oscar told us they hauled the stove to the timber lot because it was controlled by Valdez's trucking company. They planned to dump more equipment there and bulldoze it later. But a contractor got spooked and never came back. The lot was sold. The trail project got approved. Time did what it always does. Covered it up. "And the tarp?" Noah asked gently. Oscar's shoulders dropped. "I never asked where they took it. I didn't want to know. But I heard rumblings years later about the North Quarry. A crane, a night drop. People don't talk, but rocks do." That night I stood on the lip of the quarry and listened. The water looked blacker than any color should. The search the next week was quiet, methodical, patient. The kind of work Lauren admired in a kitchen. Divers traced gridded paths. On the third day, they brought up a weighted bundle. Inside were bones, scraps of cloth, the watch I'd given Lauren for our 5th anniversary, and the chef's knife she kept hidden in the side pocket of her jacket. On the handle was the engraving she liked to tease me about for being corny but sweet. A. The state lab made the identification in a week, but everyone knew before the email arrived. I knew when I touched the watch's cracked face and it started ticking for a second, then stopped. Noah knocked on my door with the results. "We'll arrest Russo today," he said. "Valdez may take longer, but the DA is hungry. Your wife kept everything we need." He meant the documents and the audio memos, but in my heart, I heard something else. Your wife kept her courage. Trials are slow. Anger sprints, grief crawls, and justice limps with a cane. While the DA built the case, I tried to live like a person into whose house the past had finally returned. I returned calls I'd been ignoring for years. I invited our niece over and cooked Lauren's favorite roasted chicken with lemon. I slept in our bed instead of on the couch. The DA's team traced the laundering scheme like a recipe. North Coast provisioners had legitimate business. But layered over it was a shadow ledger. Fake invoices for luxury items, truffles, caviar, saffron, were billed to select restaurants that were too busy or too trusting to notice. Those items never arrived. Instead, cash from a private equity partner went out the door disguised as payment for them. The cash returned through deposits to shell companies, Harbor and Hearth among them, which then paid consulting fees to a limited partnership controlled by Marcus Valdez. A neat loop. Lauren was the problem because she kept asking for lot numbers she could verify. She told other chefs to check too. Inspector Samuel Grant confirmed he had an appointment scheduled with her for the morning after she vanished. Caleb Russo took a plea when he realized the mountain of evidence Lauren had assembled. Her memos, her emails to the inspector, the USB spreadsheets with dates, and, worst of all for him, a voice memo from the night of August 5th. The audio was faint, but with lab enhancement, you could make out words. Lauren's voice, tight but steady. "Caleb, I'm done with this. I'll finish tonight's dinner and I'm calling the inspector." A man, lower, impatient. "Relax, we just want to talk." A second man, nervous, breathy. "We need to fix this before morning." A crash, glass shattering. Lauren shouting, "Get out of my kitchen." Then a thud and a long exhale that makes my hands shake even now. Russo admitted they had planned to scare her into silence, to take the stove and make it look like a break-in by rivals. He said Lauren grabbed a bottle of wine and threw it, that she slipped on the spill, that she hit the metal edge of the range as she fell. He claimed they panicked and staged the scene, moving the stove and later dumping her weighed down in the North Quarry while their boss arranged alibis. The judge didn't let Russo wriggle out with, "We didn't mean to." The law has names for deaths that come from cruelty and reckless acts. He got 25 to life. Marcus Valdez tried to flee but was picked up in Florida. He got 30 to life for orchestrating the scheme and the cover-up. None of that brought Lauren back. But it did something I didn't expect. It made a space in my chest where she could sit again, not as a ghost who disappeared, but as a person who lived fully and honestly, who used her last days to do what was right, even when it scared her. After the verdict, Noah drove me to the trailhead at County Road 16. The construction crew had cleared the area around the stove carefully, like archaeologists. The range had been lifted and taken to the lab. The tile square remained a pale stage in the dirt. I stood there and could almost smell rosemary. I pressed my palm to the stubborn stain where her hip once brushed, then to the clean tile beyond. "She always cleaned as she went," I said. "She hated ending the night dirty." We held a small memorial there. Not the kind with speeches and folded flags. Just friends, staff, a handful of regulars who'd never stopped asking after me in the grocery store. Isabella Kerr came and stood on my other side. She slipped a folded paper into my hand, a menu of Lauren's private dinners written in her sharp block letters. On the back, Isabella had written memories of each night, the way Lauren giggled when an elderly couple shared a dessert, the time she burned the first pancake and turned it into a joke about sacrifice to the griddle gods. "What will you do now?" Isabella asked. "I don't know," I admitted. "Maybe I'll reopen something small, not a restaurant. Maybe a community kitchen, a place where teenagers can learn to cook and talk and be safe." Isabella smiled through tears. That sounds like something she'd love. The town council later approved a plaque along the new trail. It reads, "In memory of Chef Lauren Baker, 1980 to 2011. She believed that honesty, like a good flame, brings out the best in what's real. People leave sprigs of thyme and little packets of salt there now. On quiet mornings, I walk the path and sit on a bench that faces the spot where the tile once lay. I talk to her like we're counting tickets on a busy night. 3 heads for the salmon, 2 for the steak, 1 for the truth we finally plated." Months after the trial, the state returned Lauren's belongings. Among them was the old magnetic timer with the chipped corner. It had been wedged deep in the stove's panel and missed on the first sweep, found later in the lab. I set it on our mantel. Sometimes I turn the dial to 3 minutes, her favorite number, and stand in the kitchen the way I used to at Baker and Pine, waiting for her to look up and catch my eye. The timer rings. I breathe in and out. In those 3 minutes, I can almost see her, moving with that quiet grace, arranging things into order. I tell her about the kids who come on Thursdays to chop carrots at the community kitchen. I tell her how Ava Monroe donated tiles from the old restaurant to build a backsplash there, each one numbered on the back, a tribute. Tile R48 sits in the center, as it should. I tell her about Samuel Grant, who now opens his talks to new inspectors with her story, how vigilance and courage sometimes show up in a chef's apron. I tell her that I learned something I wish I hadn't, that people who can't control their own fear try to control everyone else. But I also learned something good, that love is a kind of timer too. It keeps ringing, asking you not to forget, asking you to show up. It doesn't care if the kitchen is loud or quiet, or if the path is muddy. It just keeps time until you do the next right thing. There's one more thing I saved for last because it hurts and heals at the same time. The audio memo on Lauren's phone from the night before she died. She must have recorded it during a rare quiet moment, maybe standing right there by the stove, timer in hand. She says, "Adam, if I'm being dramatic, forgive me. This place started as a dream and got complicated. I think I can fix it. If I can't, I want you to know I tried to do the brave thing. I'll be home after one last order." Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd driven to the restaurant that night instead of falling asleep on the couch. Would I have walked in and changed the ending? Or would I have been another weight to carry to the quarry? Those questions have no answers, and I'm learning to live beside them. When people ask me now how I kept going, I tell them about the little things. The porch light we left on every night for 4,000 nights. The plant Lauren kept by the window that somehow didn't die all these years and bloomed the week the verdict came in. The people who show up with casseroles when they don't have the words. The sheriff who never stopped returning my calls. The friend who closed her hardware store early to pull a tile off the wall with me. One by one, those acts of faith make a kind of recipe you can follow in the dark. You can't rush it. You can't skip steps. You can't pretend the stove isn't there rusting in the woods. You have to walk to it, touch it, read the numbers stamped into the metal, pull the scraps from the grease lip, follow the weird invoice to the P.O. box, ask the clerk in blue glasses, find the storage unit, open the crate, Turn the dial, count the rows, lift the tile. And then you have to keep going, breathing through the grief, until the truth rings. It rang for us, finally. The truth was brutal and ordinary at the same time. Men who wanted money and control crossed a woman who wouldn't stop asking for proof. A fight, a fall, a cover-up. But the other truth, the one I hold tight, is that Lauren didn't disappear into a story of fear. She left a map. She left courage in envelopes and emails, in a code on a tile and a memo on a phone. She left enough for us to finish what she started. When I lock up the community kitchen at night, I text myself what she used to text me. One last order, and I'm coming home. It sounds silly, but it helps. Sometimes I swear I can feel her smile in it, that little lift in her voice. I tell the porch light, she's on her way, and I let it shine. If you were me, standing in that forest with the stove still bolted to the tile, would you have had the strength to pull at the first clue and keep going, even when it hurt? Subscribe if you believe every truth eventually surfaces.